There is something about being a Virgo that most people will never fully understand. It's not just the attention to detail. It's not just the discipline. It's not even the perfectionism everyone loves to talk about. It's the quiet weight you carry, the weight of seeing what others ignore, the weight of noticing flaws before they become disasters, the weight of holding yourself to standards no one else could survive. And in 2026, that weight stops being a burden. It becomes your advantage, because this is not the year Virgo questions their worth. This is the year Virgo recognizes it. You've spent years refining yourself in silence. You've corrected mistakes no one even noticed. You've rebuilt systems, relationships, and sometimes entire environments without applause. And yet, people still call you too critical, too serious, too much. What they don't see is that you were never trying to control everything. You were trying to make things better. There's a difference. Being a Virgo is not easy. It means living with a mind that never stops analyzing. It means feeling responsible for problems you didn't create. It means loving carefully, speaking thoughtfully, and walking away when standards are violated. It means holding yourself accountable even when no one else does. But here's what most people miss. That intensity, that precision, that inner pressure is not a flaw. It's a rare blessing. And in 2026, the world begins to shift in a way that finally rewards those who operate with clarity, discipline, and integrity. This year does not favor chaos. It favors precision. It favors preparation. It favors the one who has been quietly refining their craft while others were distracted. It favors you. Today, we're not just listing traits. We are uncovering 25 powerful reasons why being a Virgo is truly a blessing in 2026, not because it feels good to hear, but because it is strategically, psychologically, and spiritually true. Some of these reasons will make you feel seen. Some may challenge you. Some might even explain parts of yourself you've never been able to put into words. Stay with me until the end, because the final reason is not about personality. It's about power. And once you understand it, you will never look at your Virgo nature the same way again. If you've ever felt misunderstood because of how deeply you think, if you've ever been called too much simply because you expect excellence, if you've ever carried responsibility that wasn't yours, then this message was meant for you. Comment if this already resonates with you. Now let's begin. Reason number 25. Reason 25. Virgo's silence before they speak is a hidden advantage in 2026. There is a moment in every room where a Virgo has already understood everything, but has not yet said a word. While others rush to fill the silence, Virgo studies it. While others react emotionally, Virgo measures consequences. While others speak to be heard, Virgo listens to understand. And in 2026, this ability becomes one of the greatest blessings of all. Because this is a year where impulsive words create permanent damage. It is a year where careless reactions cost opportunities. It is a year where precision separates leaders from noise. Virgo has never been comfortable with noise. I once observed a Virgo executive during a high-stakes negotiation. The room was tense. Voices rose. Opinions clashed. Accusations flew across the table. Everyone was trying to dominate the conversation. The Virgo said nothing for nearly 20 minutes. Some assumed hesitation. Others assumed weakness. But when the silence broke, the Virgo spoke only 3 sentences, each one structured, factual, and impossible to argue with. The entire room shifted. The deal was saved. That is the power of controlled speech. Virgo does not speak to impress. Virgo speaks to refine. And that refinement comes from something deeper than intelligence. It comes from responsibility. Virgo understands something most people do not. Words create reality. Once spoken, they cannot be retrieved. That is why Virgo often appears reserved in the beginning. It is not insecurity, it is calibration. They are reading the energy. They are mapping personalities. They are calculating outcomes. In relationships, this same trait appears as caution. Virgo will not immediately reveal their emotions. They observe how someone handles truth. They watch how someone treats others. They analyze patterns before offering vulnerability. To some, this feels slow. To the mature mind, it feels safe. In 2026, discernment becomes currency. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Not every environment deserves your opinion. Not every battle deserves your correction. And Virgo's natural restraint protects them from unnecessary entanglements. This year rewards those who know when to speak and when to remain still. Silence is not emptiness. For Virgo, silence is strategy. There is also a deeper psychological layer here. Virgo often fears saying the wrong thing, not because they doubt themselves, but because they care about accuracy. They replay conversations in their mind. They analyze tone. They refine wording internally before expressing it externally. Some might call this overthinking, but in truth, it is respect for precision, and precision builds trust. People may not always understand Virgo's quiet nature at first, but over time they recognize something rare. When a Virgo speaks, it matters. That consistency builds authority. In personal life, this manifests as measured honesty. Virgo does not explode without reason. They do not confess emotions impulsively. When they express disappointment, it has been deeply processed. When they express love, it has been thoroughly evaluated. When they express commitment, it is intentional. And that makes it powerful. In 2026, there will be moments where chaos tempts you to react quickly, situations that push emotional buttons, people who test your boundaries. Your blessing is not reacting immediately. Your blessing is thinking before responding. Your blessing is emotional discipline, because emotional discipline is strength. And here is what makes this trait even more profound. Virgo's silence is not avoidance. It is refinement before action. There is a massive difference. Avoidance runs from discomfort. Refinement prepares for impact. When Virgo chooses silence, they are not retreating. They are sharpening. That sharpening is what allows them to speak with clarity when it truly matters. In professional settings, this makes Virgo a stabilizing force. In relationships, it makes them trustworthy. In conflict, it makes them formidable. Because the person who speaks less but observes more sees everything. And seeing everything is power. But there is a shadow here as well. Sometimes Virgo stays silent too long. Sometimes they hold thoughts that deserve expression. Sometimes they analyze so carefully that opportunities pass. This is where evolution enters. The blessing of silence becomes complete only when paired with courage. 2026 is not asking you to speak more. It is asking you to speak with intention. Not to silence yourself, not to shrink, but to recognize that your voice carries weight precisely because you do not waste it. That is the difference between noise and authority. And authority is built slowly. Virgo has been building it for years. Life lesson. Your power does not come from speaking first. It comes from speaking precisely. Mastering your timing is more valuable than mastering attention. When you learn that not every thought requires expression, you gain control over your environment instead of letting it control you. If this resonates with how you operate in conversations, comment if this feels true for you. Now, as powerful as Virgo's silence is, it becomes even more transformative when combined with something else, something that shapes who they allow into their inner world. And that brings us to reason number 24. Reason 24. Virgo's need for meaningful conversation is a rare gift in 2026. There is something that immediately shifts inside a Virgo when a conversation moves from surface-level noise to genuine depth. You can see it in their eyes. At first, they are polite, observing, measured, respectful. But the moment someone asks a thoughtful question, the moment someone speaks with substance instead of performance, something unlocks. Virgo comes alive. In a world that increasingly rewards speed over substance, 2026 quietly begins to expose how empty superficial communication truly is. Quick reactions, fast opinions, loud confidence, but not depth. And depth is where Virgo thrives. Virgo does not fall in love with charisma. Virgo falls in love with clarity. They are drawn to minds that can articulate thoughts carefully, to people who challenge them intellectually, to dialogue that explores nuance instead of cliches. Small talk drains them, not because they are antisocial, but because they are precise. Virgo listens for coherence. They listen for consistency. They listen for logic, sincerity, and intention. I once met a Virgo writer who described this perfectly. She told me she could sit silently at a dinner table for an hour, completely disengaged, until someone asked a question about purpose, responsibility, or self-improvement. Then she would lean forward, because that is where her mind lives. Virgo's mind is not built for idle conversation. It is built for refinement. In relationships, this becomes a powerful filter. If someone can hold Virgo's attention in conversation, not with drama, not with exaggeration, but with intelligence and emotional maturity, they earn access. Conversation is the gateway to Virgo's trust. And in 2026, communication becomes even more critical. This is a year where misunderstandings destroy opportunities, where impulsive speech fractures connections, where clarity becomes a rare commodity. Virgo's natural preference for thoughtful dialogue protects them. They do not rush into bonds built on chemistry alone. They analyze compatibility through words. They measure emotional intelligence through discussion. This makes their connections fewer but stronger. But there is a shadow here as well. Sometimes Virgo expects intellectual alignment that others are not prepared to offer. Sometimes they withdraw too quickly from people who cannot meet them mentally at first glance. This is where growth lives. The blessing is not just in demanding depth. It is in teaching others how to reach it. When Virgo shares their insight patiently without superiority, they elevate conversations around them. They raise the standard. And in 2026, raising standards is not arrogance. It is survival. Life lesson. Do not apologize for craving depth. But remember, wisdom is not proven by complexity alone. True mastery is the ability to translate intelligence into understanding. When you combine precision with patience, you become not just insightful, but influential. If you value meaningful conversations over empty words, comment if this resonates with you. Now there is something even more specific about Virgo standards, especially when it comes to attraction and emotional connection. And that brings us to reason number 23. Reason 23. Virgo's attraction to intelligence and humor is a standard, not a preference. There is a very specific moment when someone wins a Virgo's attention. It is not when they boast. It is not when they dominate the room. It is when they say something clever quietly and follow it with humor that reveals awareness. Virgo is magnetized by intelligent wit, not loud jokes, not exaggerated charm, but subtle intelligence wrapped in lightness. Especially for a Virgo woman, humor is not entertainment. It is proof that someone can observe reality clearly enough to twist it gently. Proof that someone understands nuance. Proof that someone can think and still remain grounded. In 2026, this becomes even more significant because this year exposes pretenders. It reveals who relies on image and who relies on substance. Virgo's attraction system is calibrated to detect authenticity. They notice inconsistencies in speech. They analyze tone shifts. They pick up on small contradictions others ignore. But when someone blends intelligence with humor, it signals emotional balance. It signals that the mind is sharp but not rigid. That is irresistible to Virgo. I once studied the relationship patterns of a Virgo entrepreneur. Every partner she had ever chosen shared one quality: mental agility. They could debate without ego. They could laugh without cruelty. They could correct without humiliation. She once said, "If someone can make me laugh while teaching me something new, I'm listening." That is the Virgo standard. This is not superficial attraction. It is neurological. Virgo's mind is active, analytical, precise. It seeks stimulation. It seeks growth. It seeks improvement. Humor softens that intensity. Intelligence feeds it. Together they create balance. And balance is everything to Virgo. But here is the deeper truth. Virgo does not choose partners based on excitement. They choose based on sustainability. Can this person grow with me? Can this person challenge me? Can this person respect my standards without feeling threatened by them? In 2026, many connections will begin quickly and collapse just as fast. Virgo's blessing is that they do not rush. They test, they observe, they measure. And when they commit, it is because the foundation has been analyzed. That saves them from chaos others repeatedly step into. However, the shadow here is perfection in expectation. Sometimes Virgo's standards are so refined that very few qualify. Sometimes their evaluation process becomes a barrier instead of protection. Growth in 2026 will require discernment, not impossibility. The blessing is not in making standards unreachable. It is in making them intentional. Life lesson: standards protect your future, but walls isolate it. Learn the difference. When you combine discernment with openness, you create connection without compromising yourself. If intelligence and humor are non-negotiable for you, comment if this feels true. Now, beneath Virgo's standards in conversation and attraction lies something even more complex, something that many misunderstand completely. And that is the way Virgo processes emotion. Reason number 22 awaits. Reason 22. Virgo's difficulty expressing emotions is depth, not detachment. There is a common misunderstanding about Virgo. People assume that because Virgo does not immediately express what they feel, they must not feel deeply. Nothing could be further from the truth. Virgo does not lack emotion. Virgo filters it. Before a Virgo speaks about their feelings, they analyze them. Before they confess hurt, they examine whether it is justified. Before they declare love, they test its durability. To some, this appears distant. To those who understand it, this is maturity. In 2026, emotional impulsivity will cost many people stability. Reactions will be amplified. Conflicts will escalate quickly. Relationships will fracture over words spoken without reflection. Virgo's emotional restraint becomes protection. I once worked with a Virgo therapist who told me something profound. She said, "I never express anger immediately. I need to understand whether it's pain, disappointment, or expectation." That sentence reveals everything. Virgo does not trust raw emotion without analysis. They separate feeling from reaction. They ask, is this temporary? Is this projection? Is this fear? Or is this truth? That internal questioning can feel exhausting. Because Virgo does not just experience emotion, they dissect it. They replay conversations in their mind. They evaluate tone. They analyze intention. They search for the precise root of discomfort. This is why when Virgo finally opens up, their words are not chaotic. They are clear, and clarity builds trust. In relationships, this means Virgo rarely explodes without cause. When they express dissatisfaction, it has been deeply processed. When they reveal vulnerability, it has been thoroughly considered. That makes their emotional disclosures rare and powerful. But there is a shadow here. Sometimes Virgo processes so internally that others misinterpret their silence as indifference. Sometimes they wait so long to express what they feel that the other person has already created their own narrative. Growth in 2026 will require balance. The blessing is not just in emotional discipline, it is in knowing when to share the process. Because your internal clarity deserves external expression, Virgo must learn that expressing emotion does not weaken precision. It strengthens connection. Your emotions are not problems to solve. They are signals to understand. Life lesson. Emotional intelligence is not about suppressing feeling. It is about refining reaction. But refinement must not become isolation. When you learn to share your process instead of hiding it, your relationships deepen instead of drift. If you've ever been misunderstood because you don't express emotions quickly, comment if this resonates with you. Now, while Virgo's emotional depth is often hidden, there is another trait that people notice immediately, and that is their inability to remain stagnant. Which brings us to reason number 21. Reason 21. Virgo's restlessness is a drive for improvement, not instability. Virgo does not sit comfortably in stagnation. Even in moments of success, something inside them whispers, "This can be better." This is often labeled as perfectionism, but it is more than that. It is refinement instinct. Virgo's mind is wired to identify inefficiency, to notice gaps, to detect potential upgrades in systems, habits, relationships, even in themselves. In 2026, this trait becomes incredibly valuable because this is not a year that rewards complacency. It rewards those who adapt. It rewards those who refine. It rewards those who improve quietly while others remain distracted. I once observed a Virgo project manager in a corporate setting. The project was functioning well enough. Deadlines were being met. Performance was average. Most were satisfied. The Virgo was not. She reorganized the workflow, adjusted communication structures, streamlined decision-making, removed unnecessary steps. Within months, productivity doubled. She was not restless because she was dissatisfied with life. She was restless because she could see potential. That is the difference. Virgo's restlessness is not chaos. It is vision. They cannot ignore inefficiency. They cannot unsee flaws. They cannot pretend something is fine when it could be exceptional. But this constant improvement drive comes with pressure. Virgo often applies the same standards to themselves. Self-criticism becomes internal fuel. And while that fuel drives growth, it can also create exhaustion. In 2026, the lesson is not to stop improving. It is to redefine what improvement means. Improvement is not self-punishment. Improvement is intentional evolution. Your inability to settle has built your strength, but it must not destroy your peace. Virgo's restlessness, when balanced, becomes innovation. When unbalanced, it becomes anxiety. The blessing is not in constant motion. It is in purposeful motion. Life lesson. Growth should energize you, not exhaust you. Refinement should elevate you, not diminish you. When you improve from vision instead of insecurity, you transform pressure into power. If you constantly feel the need to improve everything around you, comment, if this feels true. Now, this drive for refinement doesn't stop at personal growth. It extends into how Virgo loves, commits, and builds experiences with others. And that leads us to reason number 20. Reason 20. Virgo's thoughtful planning is devotion in action. There is a quiet kind of love that does not announce itself with grand speeches. It reveals itself in preparation, in details, in foresight. That is how Virgo loves. When a Virgo plans something, a trip, a project, even a simple evening, it is never random. It is intentional. Every variable is considered, every comfort anticipated, every possible inconvenience minimized. To an outsider, this may look like control, but to the one receiving it, it feels like safety. In 2026, stability becomes rare, plans change quickly, circumstances shift without warning. Many will operate reactively. Virgo will not. Virgo prepares. I once observed a Virgo partner planning what seemed like a simple weekend getaway. While others would have booked a flight and figured things out later, this Virgo researched local transportation, weather patterns, restaurant reviews, backup routes, and even the emotional preferences of their partner. It wasn't obsession, it was care. They were not trying to control the experience. They were trying to remove friction from it. That is devotion in Virgo language. Virgo does not always express affection through dramatic declarations. They express it through effort, through organization, through protecting you from avoidable problems. In relationships, this becomes deeply reassuring. When a Virgo commits, they are thinking long-term. They are not just asking, does this feel good today? They are asking, will this sustain us tomorrow? This kind of thinking becomes a blessing in 2026, especially as impulsive connections fade quickly. Virgo's deliberate nature filters out instability. But here is the shadow. Sometimes Virgo overfunctions. Sometimes they carry too much responsibility in a relationship. They solve problems before they are asked to. They manage dynamics others should manage themselves. This can create imbalance. The lesson in 2026 is not to stop planning. It is to plan with reciprocity. Devotion must be mutual. Effort must be appreciated. When Virgo learns to invest only where effort is returned, their planning transforms from obligation into shared construction. And that shared construction becomes powerful. Life lesson. Care is not measured by volume, it is measured by consistency, but never carry more weight than what is shared. When your effort meets equal intention, love becomes stability instead of strain. If you show love through preparation and effort, comment if this resonates with you. Now, behind Virgo's thoughtful devotion lies one of the most discussed traits of all but rarely understood correctly. And that brings us to reason number 19. Reason 19. Virgo's perfectionism is a standard of excellence, not obsession. Perfectionism is the word people use. Excellence is the word Virgo understands. Virgo does not wake up wanting things to be flawless for vanity. They want things to function properly. They want alignment. They want order where chaos threatens structure. In 2026, this trait becomes especially powerful because systems built on shortcuts will collapse, but systems built on precision will endure. Virgo sees what is unfinished. They notice the typo others ignore. They catch the inconsistency in logic. They sense imbalance in a process before it creates failure. This is not accidental. It is neurological. Their mind is structured for refinement. I once consulted for a Virgo surgeon known for double-checking everything. Staff occasionally teased him for reviewing procedures repeatedly, but over years his error rate was nearly zero. He wasn't afraid of mistakes. He respected consequences. That is the essence of Virgo perfectionism. It is not fear-driven control. It is responsibility-driven awareness. But there is a cost. Virgo often applies these standards to themselves. They replay small errors. They critique their own performance harshly. They struggle to celebrate achievements fully because they see what could have been improved. In 2026, this internal pressure must evolve because perfection is not the goal. Precision is. Perfection demands flawlessness. Precision demands intention. There is a difference. When Virgo shifts from chasing perfection to mastering refinement, something changes. They stop punishing themselves for imperfection, and they start honoring progress. That is where true power emerges, because the world in 2026 does not need flawless individuals. It needs competent ones. And Virgo is built for competence. The blessing of perfectionism is structure. The danger of perfectionism is paralysis. The growth of 2026 is balance. Life lesson. Excellence is sustainable. Perfection is not. Refine without destroying yourself in the process. When you shift from self-criticism to self-mastery, your standards become strength instead of stress. If you hold yourself to standards most people don't understand, comment if this feels true. Now, as powerful as Virgo's precision is in work and structure, it becomes even more intricate in love. And that leads us to reason number 18. Reason 18. Building emotional connection with a Virgo is slow, but it lasts. There is something almost sacred about the pace at which Virgo allows someone into their emotional world. They do not rush. They do not fall blindly. They do not confuse intensity with intimacy. For Virgo, connection is built, not sparked. In 2026, this becomes a rare advantage because many relationships will begin quickly this year. Chemistry will feel powerful. Words will be exchanged rapidly. Promises will be made prematurely, and then, just as quickly, they will dissolve. Virgo moves differently. They watch, they measure, they observe how someone handles pressure, how someone speaks about others, how someone reacts when disappointed. Trust is not given because of excitement. It is earned through consistency. I once observed a Virgo woman in the early stages of dating. The man she was seeing was charismatic, expressive, emotionally intense. He spoke about the future within weeks. She did not mirror him. She asked questions instead. Not romantic questions, practical ones. How do you handle conflict? How do you respond when plans change? How do you treat people when they can't offer you anything? He was surprised. She was evaluating. That is how Virgo protects their heart. They understand something most people learn too late. Emotional depth without stability becomes chaos. And Virgo does not tolerate chaos in matters of the heart. This slow pace is often misunderstood as disinterest, but in reality it is investment screening. Virgo is not afraid of love. They are afraid of waste. They do not want temporary passion. They want durability. And in 2026, durability becomes priceless. However, there is a shadow. Sometimes Virgo's caution becomes hesitation. Sometimes they protect themselves so carefully that opportunities pass. Growth this year requires discernment, not fear. The blessing is not in staying guarded forever. It is in recognizing when safety has been earned. Once Virgo feels secure, their loyalty is extraordinary. Their love is steady. Their support is practical and reliable. They do not disappear when things become difficult. They improve the system. Life lesson. Move slowly enough to see clearly, but not so slowly that fear disguises itself as wisdom. When you balance caution with courage, you build love that endures. If you've ever taken your time before trusting someone, comment if this resonates with you. Now, while Virgo's approach to love is deliberate, their emotional intensity can surface in powerful ways when boundaries are crossed. And that brings us to reason number 17. Reason 17. Virgo's ability to regain calm after anger is emotional mastery. There is a myth that Virgo is always calm. That is not true. Virgo feels anger deeply, but they rarely let it control them for long. When a Virgo loses their temper, it is usually because something fundamental has been violated: fairness, honesty, responsibility, respect. They do not explode randomly. They react when patterns repeat. In 2026, emotional triggers will be common. People will be reactive. Boundaries will be tested. Words will be misused. Virgo's strength is not in never getting angry. It is in restoring equilibrium quickly. I once studied a Virgo leader during a conflict within her team. She confronted an employee firmly, almost sharply. There was tension in the room. But later that same day, she approached the same employee calmly and explained the reasoning behind her reaction. No ego, no prolonged hostility, just clarity. That is Virgo's gift. They process anger like they process everything else analytically. They ask, was this justified? Was I fair? What solution resolves this? Virgo does not enjoy holding grudges. It is inefficient. They would rather repair than escalate. That is rare because many people confuse pride with strength. Virgo understands that resolution is strength, but here is the shadow. Sometimes Virgo internalizes anger too quickly. They return to calm externally while still processing internally. This can create hidden resentment if not addressed. The evolution of 2026 requires expression alongside regulation. Calm should not mean suppression. It should mean clarity. Your ability to regain composure is powerful, but your voice deserves space too. Life lesson. Emotional control is strength, but emotional honesty is courage. When you combine both, you become stable without becoming silent. If you're someone who can get upset but quickly regain your balance, comment if this feels true. Now there is something even more defining about Virgo's emotional boundaries, something that many people only understand when it is too late. And that leads us to reason number 16. Reason 16. Virgo's ability to walk away is self-respect, not coldness. There is a moment when a Virgo stops explaining, stops correcting, stops trying, and simply withdraws. For those on the outside, it can feel sudden, but for Virgo, that moment has been building for a long time. Virgo does not walk away impulsively. They endure, they analyze, they give chances, they adjust. They communicate in subtle ways long before they detach. But when patterns repeat, when standards are ignored, when effort is not reciprocated, they close the door quietly. And in 2026, this becomes one of their greatest blessings. Because this year will expose superficial loyalty. It will reveal who values you only when convenient. It will highlight who respects your boundaries and who tests them repeatedly. Virgo's strength is not confrontation for drama. It is strategic detachment. I once observed a Virgo business partner who discovered a repeated breach of trust. There was no shouting, no emotional outburst, no public conflict. Just a calm restructuring of access. Conversations became formal, boundaries became clear, and eventually the partnership ended. Not because Virgo lacked emotion, but because Virgo values integrity over attachment. This is what many misunderstand. Virgo does not leave because they feel nothing. They leave because they feel too much and refuse to let it be disrespected. Their loyalty is deep, but it is conditional upon mutual responsibility. And in 2026, where many relationships will fracture under pressure, Virgo's clarity will protect them from prolonged damage. However, there is a shadow here. Sometimes Virgo detaches before fully expressing what hurt them. Sometimes they assume others should have known better. Growth this year requires communication before departure. Your standards are valid, but your silence should not replace clarity. The blessing is not just in walking away, it is in knowing you can. That internal confidence changes everything. Because once Virgo realizes they do not depend on validation, their energy shifts. They stop chasing, they start choosing. And choosing is power. Life lesson. You are not required to stay where respect is absent, but give clarity before you give distance. When you leave with integrity instead of resentment, you preserve your strength. If you've ever walked away quietly instead of fighting loudly, comment if this resonates with you. Now, this self-respect doesn't stop at relationships. It extends into how Virgo approaches responsibility and independence. And that brings us to reason number 15. Reason 15. Virgo's independence is mastery of self-reliance. Virgo prefers to do things their own way, not because they reject help, but because they trust their method. When Virgo takes on a task, they visualize the structure immediately. They see the steps, the sequence, the adjustments required, and they want control over execution. In 2026, independence becomes invaluable. External systems will feel unpredictable. Instructions will change. Leadership may lack clarity. Virgo's ability to rely on their own discipline becomes stabilizing. I once studied a Virgo architect tasked with redesigning a failing project. The original team worked collaboratively but lacked direction. Deadlines slipped. Communication fractured. When the Virgo took over, the first change was structure. Clear timelines, defined roles, precise accountability. Within months, the project regained control. This was not arrogance, it was clarity. Virgo thrives when responsibility is clear and execution is precise. Their independence is not rebellion. It is efficiency. However, there is a shadow. Sometimes Virgo resists delegation. Sometimes they carry more than necessary because trusting others feels risky. This creates exhaustion. The growth of 2026 is refinement of leadership. Independence should not mean isolation. Self-reliance should not mean overburden. When Virgo learns to delegate wisely, not blindly, their impact multiplies. Because their strength is not in doing everything alone. It is in building systems that function properly. Your independence is a blessing because it makes you dependable. But the highest evolution of independence is selective collaboration. Life lesson: self-reliance builds confidence, but strategic collaboration builds expansion. Trust yourself, but don't deny yourself support where it is earned. If you prefer handling things your own way because you trust your standards, comment if this feels true. Now, as powerful as Virgo's independence is, there is something even more intimate that reveals the depth of their trust. And that leads us to reason number 14. Reason 14. When Virgo shows physical affection, it means trust has been earned. Virgo does not rush into intimacy, not emotionally, not physically. To many, affection is spontaneous. To Virgo, it is sacred. They need emotional security before vulnerability. They need consistency before closeness. They need to feel safe before surrendering that part of themselves. And in 2026, where impulsive connections will rise and fall rapidly, this restraint becomes protection. I once observed a Virgo in a relationship where their partner constantly questioned why they weren't overly expressive at the beginning. The partner wanted grand displays, dramatic affection, constant reassurance. The Virgo remained steady, not cold, not distant, measured. But months later, when trust had been proven through actions, not words, that same Virgo transformed. Their affection became intentional, deep, focused, meaningful. Because Virgo does not give fragments, they give commitment. When a Virgo initiates closeness, whether through a gentle touch, a kiss, or a quiet moment of presence, it is never random. It is calculated vulnerability. They have evaluated your consistency. They have observed your behavior under pressure. They have analyzed whether you respect boundaries. Once that internal checklist clears, intimacy becomes profound. This is why affection from a Virgo feels different. It carries weight. It carries intention. It carries investment. But here is the shadow. Sometimes Virgo equates vulnerability with risk so strongly that they delay connection longer than necessary. They fear emotional exposure. They fear losing control. The lesson of 2026 is not to lower standards. It is to recognize when trust has already been proven. Because vulnerability, when shared wisely, strengthens bonds instead of weakening them. Your caution is not a flaw. It is protection. But protection must evolve into participation. Life lesson. Intimacy is not about speed. It is about safety. But safety should not become a permanent wall. When trust is earned, allow closeness to deepen instead of resisting it. If you only show physical affection once trust is solid, comment if this resonates with you. Now, beneath Virgo's controlled vulnerability lies another trait that many misunderstand and sometimes underestimate. And that leads us to reason number 13. Reason 13. Virgo's sarcasm is intelligence expressed through humor. Virgo's humor is not loud. It is sharp, it is subtle, it is observational, and often it comes wrapped in sarcasm. But unlike careless sarcasm that wounds, Virgo's version usually exposes truth. They notice contradictions, they detect irony, they identify inefficiencies in logic and sometimes express it playfully. In 2026, where tension and unpredictability will be common, humor becomes emotional regulation. Virgo uses wit as release. I once observed a Virgo analyst during a stressful team crisis. Deadlines were collapsing, frustration was high, emotions were escalating. In the middle of tension, the Virgo calmly remarked, "Well, at least now we've officially proven what not to do." The room laughed. Tension diffused. Problem-solving resumed. That is strategic humor. Virgo's sarcasm is not cruelty. It is clarity wrapped in lightness. They can say something others are thinking, but with timing that prevents explosion. This makes them powerful communicators. However, there is a shadow. When frustrated, Virgo's sarcasm can become sharper than intended. Precision in language can cut when not softened with warmth. The growth of 2026 is balance. Use humor to elevate, not to defend. Because sometimes sarcasm hides unspoken frustration. And unspoken frustration deserves direct expression. Your wit is a gift. It makes conversations engaging. It makes environments lighter. It reveals your mental agility. But your intelligence does not require sharpness to prove itself. Life lesson. Humor is powerful when it heals. It becomes harmful when it masks resentment. Speak truth with lightness, but never hide your real feelings behind wit. If people often describe your humor as clever or sarcastic, comment if this feels true. Now, Virgo's humor, independence, restraint, and emotional discipline all come together most clearly in one place: romantic relationships. And that brings us to reason number 12. Reason 12. Dating a Virgo elevates you whether you're ready or not. Dating a Virgo is not casual. Even when it begins lightly, it does not remain shallow. Because Virgo does not enter relationships simply to feel something. They enter to build something. In 2026, many connections will form quickly driven by attraction, convenience, or loneliness. But just as quickly, they will collapse under pressure. Virgo does not operate that way. When Virgo dates, they observe patterns. They notice how you treat waitstaff, how you manage stress, how you handle disagreement, how consistent your words are with your actions. They are not judging to criticize. They are evaluating for longevity. I once studied a Virgo man who dated with remarkable patience. While others rushed to label relationships, he took time. He asked direct questions. He clarified expectations early. His partners often said the same thing. "He makes me want to be better." That is the Virgo effect. Because Virgo does not tolerate mediocrity in themselves, and they quietly encourage growth in others. Not through pressure, through example. They show up on time. They follow through. They communicate clearly. They expect maturity. And in doing so, they elevate the dynamic. This is why dating a Virgo feels stabilizing. You are not guessing where you stand. You are not navigating emotional chaos. You are entering a system designed for improvement. But there is a shadow. Sometimes Virgo standards feel intimidating. Sometimes their corrective instinct surfaces in subtle critiques. Sometimes their desire to refine becomes interpreted as dissatisfaction. Growth in 2026 requires awareness. Encourage, but do not micromanage. Support, but do not overcorrect. Love is not a project to perfect. It is a space to nurture. When Virgo balances refinement with acceptance, their relationships become deeply fulfilling. Life lesson: raise the standard, but not at the expense of warmth. Encourage growth, but allow imperfection. The strongest relationships are not flawless. They are intentional. If you've ever felt that dating you challenges others to improve, comment if this resonates with you. Now, as structured and intentional as Virgo is in relationships, there is one crucial thing they need during moments of emotional tension. And that brings us to reason number 11. Reason 11. Giving Virgo space during anger preserves the relationship. When Virgo becomes upset, it is rarely spontaneous. It is cumulative. They have noticed a pattern. They have processed it internally. They have tried to adjust quietly. And when the threshold is crossed, they react. But here is what makes Virgo unique. They do not want prolonged chaos. They want resolution. In 2026, emotional reactivity will escalate quickly in many environments. Social tension, personal stress, professional pressure, all will amplify responses. Virgo's instinct during anger is not destruction, it is distance. They need space, not because they are avoiding the issue, but because they refuse to speak carelessly. I once observed a Virgo colleague who became visibly frustrated during a team dispute. Instead of continuing the argument, she excused herself. An hour later, she returned calm, structured, solution-oriented. The issue was resolved in minutes. That is emotional regulation. Virgo understands something critical. Words spoken in anger are inefficient. They prefer to pause, process, refine, and then respond with clarity. But here is the shadow. If given no space, if pressured to react immediately, Virgo can become sharper than intended. Their precision can turn cutting. This is why understanding their rhythm matters. Virgo does not need dramatic reconciliation. They need time to recalibrate. In 2026, mastering emotional timing becomes a superpower. Your ability to step back instead of escalating will protect your stability. But growth also requires communication. Taking space should not mean silent resentment. It should mean intentional return. Life lesson: space is not withdrawal, it is recalibration. Responding calmly is stronger than reacting quickly, but always return to the conversation with clarity, not avoidance. If you need space to process before resolving conflict, comment if this feels true. Now, as disciplined as Virgo is with emotional timing, there is another trait that defines their communication style and often surprises others. And that brings us to reason number 10. Reason 10. Virgo's brutal honesty is integrity, not cruelty. There is something unmistakable about the way a Virgo tells the truth. They do not decorate it. They do not dilute it. They do not disguise it with unnecessary drama. They deliver it cleanly. And in 2026, this becomes one of their most powerful blessings. Because this is a year where illusions collapse, where exaggerated promises unravel, where half-truths create long-term consequences. Virgo does not thrive in illusion. They thrive in accuracy. I once worked with a Virgo consultant brought into a struggling company. Everyone on the leadership team avoided confronting the core issue. They blamed the market timing competitors. The Virgo walked into the room and said calmly, "The problem isn't external, it's structural. And it starts here." Silence followed. No one enjoyed hearing it, but it saved the company. Virgo does not speak harshly for pleasure. They speak directly for correction. Their honesty is not emotional aggression. It is problem solving. In relationships, this manifests as clarity. Virgo will tell you when something feels off. They will point out inconsistencies. They will address behaviors others might tolerate silently. This can feel intense, but it eliminates confusion. You always know where you stand. In 2026, where miscommunication will fracture many connections, Virgo's straightforwardness builds trust. However, there is a shadow. Precision without softness can feel like criticism. Truth without empathy can sound like judgment. Growth this year requires refinement, not suppression. You do not need to speak less truth. You need to deliver it with awareness. Honesty becomes power when it is constructive. It becomes damaging when it is defensive. Virgo's evolution is learning the difference. Life lesson. Truth builds trust when it is rooted in care. Precision is powerful, but tone determines impact. Speak honestly, but never forget the humanity of the person receiving it. If people often describe you as too honest, comment if this resonates with you. Now, Virgo's honesty in communication is strong, but it becomes even more intricate when it comes to love itself. And that leads us to reason number 9. Reason 9. Virgo's perfectionism in love is devotion at its highest level. When Virgo loves, they study. They observe your preferences. They remember your patterns. They track the small details most people overlook. Not because they are obsessive, but because they care. In 2026, surface-level romance will be common. Grand gestures, quick declarations, temporary intensity. Virgo moves differently. They refine their love. I once observed a Virgo partner preparing a simple anniversary dinner. It wasn't extravagant. There were no dramatic surprises, but every detail reflected memory. A dish mentioned casually months before, a song referenced in passing, a quiet acknowledgement of a previous conflict that had been resolved. Nothing random, everything intentional. That is Virgo love. They do not aim for spectacle. They aim for precision. Their perfectionism in relationships is not about demanding flawlessness from their partner. It is about showing up prepared. But here is the shadow. Sometimes Virgo holds themselves to impossible standards in love. They overanalyze their mistakes. They replay arguments. They fear falling short. This internal pressure can create quiet anxiety. The lesson of 2026 is not to love less carefully. It is to love with grace toward yourself, because devotion does not require perfection. It requires presence. Virgo's attention to detail makes their love steady, reliable, and deeply thoughtful. But their highest evolution is allowing imperfection without equating it to failure. Life lesson. Love thrives on effort, not flawlessness. Refine your actions, but release self-punishment. When devotion is balanced with self-compassion, relationships become sustainable. If you show love through thoughtful details rather than dramatic displays, comment if this feels true. Now, Virgo's precision in love is powerful, but their growth does not stop there. It becomes even more visible when they confront their own mistakes. And that brings us to reason number 8. Reason 8. Virgo's ability to learn from mistakes is evolution in real time. One of the most underestimated blessings of being a Virgo is this: they do not repeat the same mistake twice, not because they are perfect, but because they analyze failure with surgical precision. When something goes wrong, Virgo does not collapse into denial. They do not blame endlessly. They do not distract themselves to avoid discomfort. They study it. What happened? Where was the flaw? What signal did I miss? How do I correct it next time? In 2026, this becomes a massive advantage because many people will repeat patterns, emotional patterns, financial patterns, relationship patterns, professional miscalculations. Virgo will not. I once worked with a Virgo entrepreneur whose first business failed within 2 years. Most would have blamed the economy, timing, investors. She did not. She built a detailed document outlining every structural weakness in her model. She reworked pricing strategy, communication flow, hiring standards. Her second company thrived. That is Virgo growth. It is not ego-driven. It is system-driven. Virgo understands something crucial. Failure is data, and data can be refined, but there is a shadow. Sometimes Virgo over-identifies with their mistakes. They internalize responsibility even when circumstances were shared. They replay small errors long after correction is complete. The lesson of 2026 is not just to learn, it is to release. Refinement requires reflection, but evolution requires forgiveness. Your ability to analyze mistakes makes you resilient, but your ability to move forward without self-punishment makes you unstoppable. Life lesson. Mistakes are information, not identity. Refine the process, not your self-worth. When you learn without shaming yourself, growth becomes strength instead of stress. If you rarely repeat the same mistake twice, comment if this resonates with you. Now, beneath Virgo's capacity for growth lies one of their most defining traits, their mind. And that brings us to reason number 7. Reason 7. Virgo's analytical intelligence is practical power. Virgo's intelligence is not loud. It is precise. They do not seek attention for knowing more. They seek efficiency for knowing better. In 2026, complexity will increase. Systems will shift. Information will overwhelm. Decisions will require clarity under pressure. Virgo thrives here because their mind is structured for analysis. They break down chaos into components. They identify patterns quickly. They detect inconsistencies others overlook. I once observed a Virgo strategist during a crisis meeting. Data was scattered. Emotions were high. Assumptions were being thrown around without structure. The Virgo began asking quiet, structured questions. What are the verified facts? What variables are we assuming? What outcome are we optimizing for? Within minutes, the room shifted from panic to focus. That is practical intelligence. Virgo does not just think deeply, they think functionally. Their insight is not abstract, it is applicable. In relationships, this means they often foresee issues before they surface. In career, it means they identify inefficiencies before they cause loss. In personal growth, it means they can dissect their own habits without illusion. But here is the shadow. Sometimes Virgo overanalyzes. They make the optimal solution when a sufficient one would work. They hesitate, waiting for perfect clarity. Growth in 2026 requires decisiveness. Your analysis is a tool, not a cage. When paired with action, your intelligence multiplies impact. When isolated from action, it becomes stagnation. Virgo's blessing is clarity. Their evolution is execution. Life lesson. Clarity without action is wasted insight. Trust your analysis, then move. When precision meets momentum, progress becomes inevitable. If you are often the one who sees solutions others miss, comment if this feels true. Now, as powerful as Virgo's mind is, it influences something even more foundational. It shapes how they trust. And that leads us to reason number 6. Reason 6. Virgo's approach to trust protects what truly matters. Virgo does not trust quickly, not because they are suspicious by nature, but because they understand the cost of misplaced loyalty. Trust to Virgo is not emotional excitement, it is earned reliability. In 2026, where appearances will often mask intention, this cautious approach becomes a shield. Virgo observes before investing. They track consistency. They compare words with behavior. They notice subtle shifts in tone and commitment. I once worked with a Virgo executive who rarely delegated immediately. She gave small responsibilities first, observed performance, tested follow-through. Only after consistency was proven did she expand access. Her team respected her deeply, not because she was controlling, but because she was discerning. Virgo treats personal relationships the same way. They will not expose their vulnerabilities to someone who has not demonstrated integrity. They do not confide easily. But when they do, their loyalty is extraordinary. This is what makes Virgo's trust so valuable. It is rare, and rare things hold weight. In 2026, many will give trust too easily and regret it later. Virgo's hesitation prevents unnecessary emotional damage. But there is a shadow. Sometimes Virgo assumes others must prove themselves endlessly. Sometimes their guard remains up even after consistency is shown. Growth this year requires recalibration. Trust should not be automatic, but it should not be impossible. The blessing is not just in protecting your heart. It is in recognizing when safety has been established. Because when Virgo finally trusts, they commit fully. They defend fiercely. They remain steady. Life lesson. Trust is not a gift to distribute casually, but do not let caution become isolation. When you recognize consistency, allow connection to deepen instead of delaying it. If you take time before fully trusting someone, comment if this resonates with you. Now, beneath Virgo's guarded trust lies something more complex, a combination that defines their entire personality structure. And that brings us to reason number 5. Reason 5. Virgo's sensitivity beneath strength creates emotional depth. To the world, Virgo appears composed, structured, rational, controlled. But beneath that structure lives a deeply sensitive core. Virgo feels everything. They simply do not display it impulsively. In 2026, emotional volatility will surround many environments. People will react loudly. Instability will trigger strong responses. Virgo's strength is not lack of feeling. It is regulated feeling. I once observed a Virgo caregiver who remained calm during intense family conflict. While others argued, she listened. While others panicked, she organized solutions. Later that night alone, she processed every detail deeply. Virgo absorbs emotion. They internalize. They analyze. Their sensitivity allows them to understand unspoken dynamics. They sense tension before it is verbalized. They detect subtle emotional shifts. That makes them powerful supporters. But it also makes them vulnerable to emotional overload. The shadow of this trait is self-neglect. Virgo may prioritize others' stability over their own emotional release. They may appear strong while quietly carrying weight. Growth in 2026 requires emotional acknowledgement. Strength does not mean suppression. Sensitivity does not mean weakness. Your emotional depth is what allows you to connect authentically. But it must be honored, not hidden. Life lesson. Strength without self-awareness becomes exhaustion. Sensitivity without boundaries becomes overwhelm. When you honor both, you become grounded and compassionate at the same time. If you often appear strong while feeling deeply inside, comment if this feels true. Now, Virgo's sensitivity and trust shape their emotional world, but the way they express love is even more subtle and deliberate. And that leads us to reason number 4. Reason 4. Virgo's reserved expression of love is authentic devotion. Virgo does not love loudly. They love deliberately. They may not flood you with dramatic declarations or constant verbal reassurance. They may not display affection in exaggerated ways, but watch their actions. Watch their consistency. Watch their attention to your needs, because that is where Virgo's love lives. In 2026, performative affection will be common. Public displays, overpromising, emotional exaggeration. Virgo does not operate in performance. They operate in sincerity. I once observed a Virgo partner who rarely posted about their relationship publicly. They weren't flashy. They didn't dramatize their affection. But when their partner was overwhelmed with work, they quietly reorganized schedules, handled logistics, and removed stress without being asked. No announcement, no applause, just support. That is Virgo love. Subtle, intentional, reliable. Virgo believes love should be demonstrated through responsibility, not spectacle. They remember your routines. They show up on difficult days. They fix problems before they escalate. Their affection is structured, not theatrical. But here is the shadow. Sometimes their reserved nature makes others question their feelings. Sometimes they assume actions are enough without verbal reassurance. Growth in 2026 requires balance. Your devotion is powerful, but clarity strengthens it. You do not need to become dramatic. You need to become expressive. Because while your actions speak clearly to you, others may need to hear the words too. Life lesson. Love is proven through consistency, but reinforced through communication. Let your devotion be seen as well as felt. When action and expression align, intimacy deepens. If you show love through quiet consistency rather than grand gestures, comment if this resonates with you. Now, while Virgo's love may be reserved in tone, it is anything but predictable in depth. And that brings us to reason number 3. Reason 3. Virgo's versatility in romance keeps love alive. Virgo is often seen as structured and disciplined, but in love they are surprisingly adaptive. They understand that relationships require variation. Sometimes love needs intensity, sometimes it needs calm, sometimes it needs structure, sometimes it needs spontaneity. Virgo studies their partner's emotional rhythm. They notice what reassures you, what excites you, what stabilizes you. In 2026, adaptability becomes essential. Rigid relationships will fracture under pressure, but those who can adjust to circumstances will endure. Virgo excels at this. I once observed a Virgo in a long-term relationship. During stressful periods, they became practical and grounding. During celebratory moments, they shifted into playful and affectionate energy. They were not inconsistent. They were responsive. Virgo does not love mechanically. They love intelligently. They read emotional temperature and adjust accordingly. This makes them dynamic partners. But here is the shadow. Sometimes Virgo overthinks romance. They analyze moments instead of simply experiencing them. They try to optimize emotional exchanges instead of surrendering to them. Growth in 2026 requires presence. Not every moment needs refinement. Some moments need surrender. Your adaptability is a blessing, but spontaneity must not feel like risk. It must feel like freedom. Life lesson: adaptability strengthens connection, but allow yourself to experience without calculating every outcome. When you balance intelligence with presence, love becomes both stable and alive. If you adjust your approach in relationships based on what your partner needs, comment if this feels true. Now, Virgo's ability to adapt in love comes from something deeper, their constant awareness of their surroundings. And that leads us to reason number 2. Reason 2. Virgo's observant nature gives them an edge in 2026. Before anyone says a word, Virgo has already noticed the shift, the tone change, the hesitation, the inconsistency. They are constantly scanning not out of paranoia, but awareness. Virgo does not just look, they register. They detect small behavioral changes. They sense subtle tension. They identify patterns long before they become obvious. In 2026, this becomes a serious advantage because this year will reward those who see early, see trends before collapse, see red flags before damage, see opportunity before competition. I once observed a Virgo investor who declined an opportunity that everyone else rushed into. The numbers looked good on the surface. The enthusiasm was high, but the Virgo noticed something minor, a discrepancy in communication between departments. Nothing dramatic, just misalignment. Months later, the company fell apart due to internal mismanagement. Virgo didn't guess. They observed. This same skill applies in relationships. Virgo senses when someone is drifting emotionally before the words are spoken. They notice shifts in effort. They detect when energy changes. Sometimes this makes them anxious. Sometimes it makes them protective. But when balanced, it makes them prepared. The shadow of observation is overanalysis. Seeing too much can create imagined threats. Interpreting too deeply can generate unnecessary concern. Growth in 2026 requires calibration. Not every small detail is danger, but ignoring details entirely is weakness. Your awareness is a gift. It allows you to navigate environments with clarity, but your peace depends on choosing what deserves your focus. Life lesson: awareness is power, but selective focus is wisdom. See clearly, but do not let every detail control your emotional state. When observation is balanced with stability, you become unshakable. If you often notice things others overlook, comment if this resonates with you. Now, Virgo's awareness, discipline, honesty, and emotional control all lead to one final trait, one that defines their presence in any room. And that brings us to the final reason. Reason 1. Virgo's calm presence is their greatest power in 2026. Virgo may not dominate a room. They may not be the loudest voice. They may not demand attention. But when things fall apart, people look at them. Because Virgo remains composed, in 2026, emotional volatility will rise, stress will increase, uncertainty will test stability, and while others react loudly, Virgo steadies quietly. I once observed a Virgo manager during a sudden crisis. Systems malfunctioned, deadlines collapsed, panic spread across the team. While others escalated emotionally, the Virgo sat still, not frozen. Focused, they began asking structured questions, assigning responsibilities, rebuilding order step by step. The crisis resolved faster than expected. That is Virgo's calm. It is not passivity. It is internal control. Virgo chooses their battles. They do not react to every provocation. They conserve energy for what matters. This makes them emotionally durable. But there is a shadow. Sometimes Virgo avoids confrontation in order to preserve peace. Sometimes their calm hides discomfort. Growth in 2026 requires alignment. Your calm should come from confidence, not avoidance. Because your steady presence is not weakness, it is authority. You do not need to raise your voice to command respect. You command it through consistency. Life lesson: true strength is not loud, it is stable. When you master your internal state, the external world cannot destabilize you. If you are often the calm one in chaotic situations, comment if this feels true. Now that we have uncovered all 25 reasons why being a Virgo is truly a blessing in 2026, it's time to bring this full circle. Let's move into the final reflection. Conclusion: being a Virgo in 2026 is not just a blessing. It is an advantage. Now that we have uncovered all 25 reasons, something should feel different. Not inflated, not exaggerated, but clarified. Because being a Virgo was never about being perfect. It was about being precise in a world that often rewards noise. In 2026, noise will increase. Reactions will be faster. Standards will drop in many spaces. Shortcuts will tempt people. But the individuals who rise will not be the loudest. They will be the most disciplined. They will be the most observant. They will be the most consistent. And that is where Virgo stands. You were built for refinement. You were built for responsibility. You were built for improvement. The very traits that once made you feel misunderstood, your caution, your standards, your emotional processing, your honesty, your discernment are the same traits that give you leverage this year. You do not rush trust. You do not speak carelessly. You do not attach blindly. You do not ignore flaws. And in a year where instability exposes weakness, your stability becomes visible. But here is the most important realization. Your blessing is not in being flawless. It is in being intentional. Virgo's evolution in 2026 is not about working harder. It is about refining smarter. Not about criticizing yourself more, but about recognizing how far you have already come. Not about isolating yourself with high standards, but about choosing environments that match them. You are not too much. You are calibrated. You are not too critical. You are precise. You are not too reserved. You are discerning. And discernment is rare. The final blessing of being a Virgo in 2026 is this: you do not need to change your nature. You need to trust it. Because everything we discussed, your silence, your intellect, your emotional depth, your loyalty, your structure, your calm is not random personality. It is design, and design becomes powerful when it is understood. So as you move through this year, remember, refine without destroying yourself. Love without lowering your standards. Speak truth with awareness. Walk away when respect disappears. Stay calm when others escalate. And trust that your methodical nature is not holding you back. It is positioning you ahead. If this entire journey resonated with you, if you felt seen, understood, recognized, comment, and let me know which reason reflected you the most. And if you are ready to continue exploring the deeper layers of Virgo, the psychology, the evolution, the power behind the precision, make sure you subscribe, because this year is not about noise. It is about mastery. And Virgo was built for mastery. I'll see you in the next one.